Welcome to SME's AM Influencer Series. This is dedicated to the passionate professionals who volunteer with SME to connect the digital thread of additive manufacturing within traditional manufacturing. My name is Adam Penna, your host, leading customer engagement for our SME additive manufacturing community. My guest today is Alexandre Donnadieu. He is Managing Director of North America for 3YOURMIND. 3YOURMIND is an automation software to prepare additive manufacturing part selection, ordering, and production workflows for Industry 4.0. Alexandre, welcome.
Thank you very much. Very happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation, Adam.
Yeah, always wonderful to chat with you. I know we've been talking for years now, and it's really good to see the progression of 3YOURMIND and where you've been with everything growing in North America. So it's exciting to have you here today.
Very exciting. Happy also to talk about that in the context of SME, which I know is working a lot to grow additive manufacturing and with a great sense of how digital thread matters. So happy to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, no, we're happy to have you here. I know we started talking about, where we've been, where we've come from, but everybody has a first experience inside of additive manufacturing. What was your first experience with additive like?
Well, I didn't start as a user of additive manufacturing, but before joining 3YOURMIND and being in the additive manufacturing, I used to be a consultant, strategy and transformation consultant, mainly doing stuff with COOs of big enterprise of international firms, helping them define their industrial strategies with a high component in digital transformation. So I was coming kind of like from the overview of the value chain, tackling a lot of supply chain topics, and so that through the eyes of the additive manufacturing being one solution to help the value chain. To be honest, the first time I actually have seen things running with additive manufacturing, it was jewelry.
Oh, okay.
I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, with Chanel that started to, do some prototype for their jewelry. They had a quite impressive model, but I think it was the first impression that something as fine as luxury could be produced by a printer was quite impressive for me. And then, as a consultant, knowing more about the technology, but especially how it fits to the value chain was very attractive to me.
Yeah, it's interesting when you first see the benefits in action and start to be going, oh, okay. That's different. I didn't think of doing things that way. And then you start to broaden your mind on, how many things can I do layer by layer? And whoa, you can start to think about design and everything that attributes to something you could do just slightly different or something you weren't able to make before that you can. So that's where the interest starts to pull you in, man. It happens to all of us that are
exactly
taken away by 3D.
You need this first rush where you're like just figuring out the potential of the things. Everybody will tell you all the options that it offers. Even if you're not operating the printer, what could I do next with that? It's just crazy. And when you remember, by the way, at the time, it was, I think, back in 2013, 14, and then there was this huge hype of additive manufacturing where everybody thought we could do anything with it.
Yeah.
And the trend went up. A lot of investment were done. Every CEO, COO of big company wanted to have this included in their manufacturing roadmap. But then 2016, 17 arrived and more company went into the game and just realized that it was not that easy to operate additive manufacturing, that it's not going to be the thing that everybody could have at home and click and get the part being ready for, I don't know, repairing their washing machine or whatnot. And that was an interesting part also of maturing of additive manufacturing, I believe.
Yeah, I agree. It seemed like back then, people almost thought of the 3D printing machine as a teleportation machine. Like you're going to press a button and the part's just going to be there, and there's some additional steps in there that you have to be prepared for inside the process. But yeah. No, what were we going to say about that? I know that's like a common feeling.
Absolutely. And when you remember of like so many things stick from that time. For example, it happens so often when someone doesn't know exactly what additive manufacturing does, is not from the industry and so on. They say, hey, I've heard that you can print a gun. I always hear that, like, no, it's not the primary thing you do with additive manufacturing. There are so many other things you can do. But there is kind of like a gap. And I think we'll touch on that in that discussion between the image of additive manufacturing outside of the additive manufacturing world and what is the reality of 3D printing.
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess it's something that we look to answer here as far as, what's the impact of AM to the broad manufacturing industry as a whole? Yeah. And that's a good question. What do you see as that impact that additive manufacturing is having inside of manufacturing?
Well, because it is inside and we have to remember that it's not outside, and sometimes indeed it looks like it. I think, to be honest, that's a big question, but first of all, manufacturing will kind of change and is evolving already with or without additive manufacturing. There are things, big trends already happening in what we call the world of advanced manufacturing. And here we need to find the right plugs, identify the right plugs of additive manufacturing, where additive manufacturing could be enhancing the existing value chain of advanced manufacturing. There is, as far as I remember, I think it was Gartner that was, or maybe McKinsey that was breaking down the big tendencies of manufacturing in 3 big archetypes, so to speak, for smart manufacturing. One is large-scale production. Another one is smart automated plants. So this is what we talk about most of the time with additive manufacturing. And the last is highly customizable, customer-centric plants. So where you have like a lot of adaptability and flexibility. That's kind of like the 3 big trends of manufacturing, I would say. In general, I think it fits pretty well, this type of archetypes. And additive manufacturing for sure will help 2 of these trends, which is the smart automated plants and everything related to highly adaptable customer-centric factories. And that's where I see additive manufacturing helping the most. To be honest, like if we talk just about automation, there is a saying that by 2025, the customer will be the first human to touch more than 20% of products. That's the, smart automated plants that is not only for manufacturing, by the way, it's also for agriculture more and more. So that trend is something, when you think about a factory and a service bureau or a contract manufacturer, a shop floor with all 3D printers, that's kind of like this automation that can be the most advanced in additive manufacturing. And automation, even in most advanced industries, like let's say Germany, there's still like more than 50% potential of automation in the main manufacturing verticals in Germany, for example. So there's still a high potential, a high need for automation in different sectors. And for everything related to customization, when we talk about the archetype, which is the highly adaptable customer-centric plant, there, additive manufacturing is clearly a technology that can help to shorten the innovation cycles with including throughout all the production cycles, the needs of the customer. So not only the requirements, but also his behavior when using parts that are produced will be with AM. And I know that with 3YOURMIND, when we create digital thread, we can give some feedback loops about the utilization of the product or the print of the part, and enrich the data for the next part to be produced in a better way. So being able to have this flexibility in the production process, collecting the data directly from the customer, is also a very high potential for adapting to the need of the customer throughout the time and throughout the usage product.
No, it's a good point. You brought up some great things. And I know 3YOURMIND does a lot with automation on that side, on the software side, especially being a manufacturing execution system. You talk about what manufacturing needs. That's where, manufacturing is established, when you start to have that execution system and you're looking at it in a production sensibility instead of just, 3D printing at home or what have you. You're actually looking at end use parts and how that fits up for the next time you do something, and kind of carrying that smart data forward, like you're talking about in the digital thread, to be able to use for whatever's coming next and improve upon that process from each iteration.
Exactly.
It's very exciting to see that develop. And software's some of the biggest highlights I've seen in the last couple of years. Software actually catching up to what can happen inside of the machine technology, since there's so many different ones, or there's enough of them to make a lot of different products out there now that are becoming real end use applications. So great to see the software catching up, and it's really exciting to know a little bit more about what 3YOURMIND is doing, because I know that you've been involved in a lot of those projects. That's pretty interesting to see it at that level.
Absolutely. And by the way, you mentioned MES, which is Manufacturing Execution System. Our approach is that Manufacturing Execution System is just one piece of the overall vision for creating a digital thread. I think moving forward, more and more manufacturing company or industrial company will need to have a software ecosystem that brings different pieces together, not only what's happening on the shop floor, but what's happened also on the qualification of the part, or even identification of the use cases. So our approach is more like having a thread that entails not only MES functionalities, but also functionalities that we find in ERP system and product lifecycle management, to help, first of all, the customers to identify the best use case, store the right data at the right place, collect that data throughout the whole cycle of production, of course, up to the machine connectivity and print monitoring. But although it looks a little bit ambitious to tie this together, I think it's the only way forward if we really want to help big customers. We work with the US DoD, the Department of Defense, to help design that type of digital workflows. Their environment is so complex that we need to tie all of this together. There are so many personas and players throughout the AM value chain. You need to have the experts in technologies, the experts in material, the experts in certification, the designers, the business owners, all together working in that type of environment to make sense out of AM. So just one piece is not enough. So we tie this together with one end-to-end digital thread. And for us, it's not just about like how we do manage the machines, but most importantly for us is how do we help our customer design and produce better parts, because this is the end of the game, producing, identifying, qualifying, and producing better parts with additive manufacturing.
Yeah, that is the name of the game. I mean, the more applications out there, the more there could be standards that are produced, and the more standards we have, the more we could duplicate what's happening in a final part. It's interesting to see that progression. We're seeing a lot more of it. And, we're talking about, you actually opened up a little bit more there about, different manufacturers getting involved and implementing or adopting AM. What would your advice be to them?
So, hey, it's funny because this question is about like, how do we advise, or how do we also convince traditional manufacturing users to get into AM? And it's not an easy, to be honest, it's not an easy thing, because I have a different mixed experience with that. I remember back in the day, I think 3 years ago, I went to an automotive show and started to speak to a gentleman from a company, a French company, auto manufacturer, a big one, about additive manufacturing. And this guy was actually designer in some components that I don't remember exactly, but it was so funny because when I started to talk to him about what he thinks about AM and if he's using AM or not, I felt like I was a Jehovah Witness, it was like, yeah, get away with your beliefs. It doesn't exist. Additive manufacturing will never work for what I do and so forth. And it was so funny to see that, because on the other end, we knew that so many use cases were covering the type of product it was working on. So in general, the learning for that is that we have to help first, before giving any advice on how to adopt, we need to help the people to understand where additive manufacturing as a add-on of manufacturing, kind of where does it plug within the value chain. So we have to help them identify the best use cases first and identify the potential of additive manufacturing. I often say also that for that, by the way, just like they shouldn't talk to printer vendors, right? First. So if they want to get into additive manufacturing, don't talk to the printer vendors. Of course, there are technologies that are very thorough and so on. But I think it was a little bit of a mistake of the industry early on. It's like the printer runner knocks at the door, and then you open and you say, hey, what technology you have? They have the best. Okay, so you buy the technology and you test this technology. But we didn't have like kind of a holistic business model based approach to identify what would be the best technologies. So for me, the best advice I would say is basically, first of all, building a competency center within your organization with combining technology owners, designers, material scientists, and so on, working together. And first of all, and business owners as well, which is very important, as well as supply chain managers, for example, but creating this competency center that will work on potential use cases, finding how additive manufacturing can help your current processes in products, in the way you design products on one end, but also considering everything related to maintenance, tooling, repair, these things that are about maintaining your operation up to speed, but also the aftermarket of spare parts. Even though a lot of people are still skeptical about the aftermarket, especially, for example, in automotive, I believe that, and we have already some proof that there is a lot of potential in aftermarkets to identify which part have to be stored physically and which part could be stored digitally and produced on demand with AM.
Yeah, that's a big part of actually going through your inventory and figuring out which parts can be reproduced with additive and which parts are worth doing that with, and maybe even redesigning sometimes depending upon the application case. But I think the whole pandemic, if one thing good it did do is take a look at people's supply chains and look at 3D printing for risk mitigation inside of what might be happening in the future. So that's a good thing. Have you seen that interest pick up from the clients you work with out there as far as looking at their inventory?
Big time.
Good. That's good to hear.
Yeah, big time actually. So before the pandemic, a lot of people would say because there was the PPE, protective equipment use cases and so on, and way to fix the value chain with additive manufacturing. It was very enticing, very exciting for everybody at the beginning, but soon enough, for a lot of application, injection molding picked up. So if you look at the risk during the pandemic was to think that AM is just a solution for fixing a situation that is broken during a supply chain crisis. Some of the effect of the hype of additive manufacturing during the pandemic was that, but still some savvy users looked at the technology more in depth and said, okay, now we have to shift our supply chain from a cost-based decision-making supply chain to a risk-based or flexibility-based supply chain model, which is, we operate a big installation. We have a lot of spare parts being replenished and shipped from many different suppliers in many different countries. We need to have a better grasp over our operations. And this happened in some industry, like for big time in defense, in the defense industry. Just starting very big project with the defense industry to screen several thousand of parts and creating a digital inventory for them. And we work with 3 armies from the NATO that in France, in Germany, in the US. So the defense industry has really seen the benefits into shifting into more, supply chain driven additive manufacturing. And then also in transportation a lot, we saw that as well. We have a case, for example, with the French railway company that is basically using our software to screen, again, thousands and thousands of parts, and then processing the life cycle of this part throughout our software. And gas and energy. This industry has really discovered the potential in terms of flexibilizing the supply chain, relocating production a lot for some states like Michigan that is now reindustrializing part of their capacities thanks to additive manufacturing. In a nutshell, there is a little bit of a hype during the pandemic that is kind of a mirage about what additive manufacturing would kind of replace injection molding, for example, for medical. I mean, there was already a trend in medical that was going up. But in other industries, many end users have figured out that actually additive manufacturing has a tremendous way to help them to create more distributed manufacturing models with a better flexibility in supply chains.
Yeah, this is very important. I think it's good to hear that work is progressing because it had an impact over the last year or so as far as the way people are thinking out there inside of the manufacturing community and what they're looking at for additive as a solution. So I had a feeling you might be answering, yes, there's a lot more of that going on. So that's good to hear. We have a great thing coming up. I know September 13th through 15th, SME's RAPID plus TCT is coming up. And this year is actually the 30th anniversary. So what are you looking forward to at RAPID plus TCT this year?
Oh, yes. So first of all, we'll be there.
Yeah.
We have completed our registration, I believe, this week.
Good.
I was at the last edition 2 years ago in Detroit. It was awesome. It's actually, for me, there's AMAG, of course, in North America. That is a big event. It's more like a conference. RAPID is really the trade show where you have the most interaction with a very broad audience, and sometimes people that are not just in additive manufacturing, people that are in manufacturing with very good conference track. Usually I learn a lot during RAPID. It's always extremely busy. I don't know how it will be this year. I'm pretty positive that there will be a lot of people coming as much as before because of the pandemic. Not sure, but we've seen other events before. I think it's picking up. I'm really positive that it will be a good show.
Yeah, it's definitely ramping up to be, especially with the amount of the community out there that we have and the interest in making it a good show. Definitely pushing forward to do some special things this year. So looking forward to that. Now, in general, we talk about SME, Society of Manufacturing Engineers, and what role would you say you see them playing in the additive manufacturing space?
Well, so SME is, to me, and at least it's the way I understand it, an organization that really is tackle more than just additive manufacturing, where additive manufacturing is part of the picture. So SME is seeing how to promote and advance manufacturing as a whole within global supply chains with different components. So I see SME as really being poised to promote this link I was talking about between manufacturing and additive manufacturing the best way, with really well-structured executive board with the right competency to bring all of this together, because I believe additive manufacturing has a little bit of a risk of tribalization somehow, because in the way additive manufacturing is structured, but also in the knowledge itself, like kind of like creating some sort of effect of tribal knowledge, because a lot of owners of additive manufacturing are sometimes less and less, but isolated from the manufacturing value chain as a whole. They are super experts. They do some events mainly together. It's really a realm of specialists, and we would benefit from kind of capitalizing more systematically in a more standardized way on the learnings we have, transmitting this information, educated people outside of additive manufacturing, leveraging universities as well, because I think SME is also doing that, like doing events with universities.
Yes, sir.
Doing events for recruiting people within the industry. So working with young people coming in, educating them, also doing information and awareness to enterprise that are considering additive manufacturing with that position of knowing manufacturing as a whole value chain as SME has. I think it's a great push forward for our industry.
Yeah, it is. I'm looking forward to seeing a lot more going on with. There's a lot more initiatives coming on directly to help that with additive manufacturing. And it's good to be a part of that with SME, because there'll be a lot more to come, and happy to see that pushing forward. Well, we do have a great additive manufacturing community, and that's what makes it really good to be part of it. At this stage, we're less than 2% of the entire manufacturing industry. However, that 2% is growing strong, and it has a very strong community. And it's been wonderful to connect with that community over, especially the pandemic, and to make things happen. But what do you think really defines the AM community?
That's a good question, because like I said, I think first of all, it's an industry of very, very advanced experts. And when you go to an event, and when and we know pretty much everyone from the industry in the United States, you know, cross a lot of the same people and so on. Still a quite small industry comparatively. You said 2%, might be even less actually.
Yeah.
But you see a lot of, first of all, different generations. It's kind of a generation melting pot within additive manufacturing, I would say. The community is from, you have like people that started in the 80s to use the first printers to really bring the technology where it is right now. And you have like all the new generation that are attracted to the mix between the hardware and the software. And it's interesting to see that in the organization, even big enterprise, the owners of additive manufacturing are often very young people. So it's this mix that makes a little bit of a feeling of family with really experienced professionals that own very deep processes, these new people coming in and wanting to push the community further. And it's a mix of people that like want to discover, it's like explorators somehow, innovate and really want to create new things with additive manufacturing, real creator based on what we say, the community of makers. And I also believe in some sense that to be there in this industry, we need also to be a little bit sometimes reckless, but have some sort of magnificent recklessness. Like that's the one of the first explorators of the Americas, or being out there and trying to push the thing forward, because the road ahead of us is not as clear as other industry. Of course, we are in this very innovative field, and so I feel like we need to be also a little bit cocky to get there. But it's yeah, one of the most exciting community I've seen in the industry in general, in manufacturing.
No, you've had some great points in there. Yeah, I agree that there has to be some risk taking, and there are some risk taking, because there's things that people say can't get done that people push through and make sure that it can be done. And that's a little bit of that definition I hadn't thought about. Just that it is that, I guess it's a controlled recklessness, because there's just sometimes some things that you have to do to make sure that it does progress, you know, and this
Exactly.
community is created enough to do that, it seems like, most of the time. So that is good.
Exactly. And I would say, yeah, risk taking in general, but it's really mainly we need a big load also of creativity. And that's what, for me, one of the main motivation to get here is really to create something. And to be honest, it's a little bit, there's a feeling of being part of the history. But also on the other end, sometimes when you knock at the door of the people from conventional manufacturing or supply chain manager and so on, it's, like I said before, you feel like you're a little bit of a Jehovah's Witness, but it's also on us to find the right use cases and the right plug, like I said, to convince the broader range of manufacturing user that additive manufacturing has a huge potential for the future.
Yeah, it's that passion of believing in the creativity. that pushes that forward. Yeah.
God creativity or something.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and that's a lot of the next part we're going to talk about. We're talking about creativity and where that comes from, and a lot of times it is the younger generation that's bringing in the new creativity, or at least pushing forward a different idea, or taking an old idea and making it better. So, what's your advice for attracting that younger generation into the workforce for additive manufacturing?
So, to be honest, I think the young generation is attracted to additive manufacturing.
Yeah, they are. Yeah. It's crazy.
I think they are. The question might be more, how do we make sure that they have the right tools to enter the field,
Yeah,
and to grow the field? So I was speaking about the tribalization of this knowledge, but how do we kind of capitalize on the knowledge of the more experienced generation of these manufacturers to really help universities? There is, for example, the Ohio State University that has amazing tracks for additive manufacturing, but a lot of other universities in the US. How do we, give them the right, like the industry, us in the industry, we also have to help these guys, these women and men in this university to train newcomers, give them the right tools, understand what is the state of the art of additive manufacturing, collaborate with them. We do that with university. We give our technology for them to understand how to, create data schema for additive manufacturing, how to learn from the way they print to improve their parts, and learn how to identify new use cases and so on. So I think it's more of a question of giving them the right tools, because they will be excited to join. I think the front end of additive manufacturing is exciting. The hype is still there, but maybe there's one group of population who still need to attract a bit more. I would say it's getting more into probably attracting more young women, I would say, in general, because I believe that it's in manufacturing. I think it's in industry in general. We still need to attract women talents to have more diversity, because it's still a very male-driven environment. And moving forward, I think that's one also the attractiveness topic to tackle as well. But I'm positive that actually additive manufacturing is attracting the relevant, young and smart people needed for growing the industry.
No, that's some good points. Keeping that educational line open, and at least being attractive by the way that you're working inside of people, see what's happening with different individuals that they look at in the industry, if you're coming in via engineering or via materials or even via business, and taking a look at an example of what a actual path looks like in the 3D printing world is very attractive from that point of it. But the educational side of, like, even the trade schools and the things that bring people in, that path is being more established as things move forward. And I think there's a lot of opportunity there to just shine, to be able to educate on all those levels and be part of the experience that brings people into understanding what we all take for granted once we're here. There's so many great things that AM can do. Of course, it has its limitations as well as anything else out there. But yeah, being able to be attractive to the workforce, it's not like it's unattractive if you look at 3D printing, but there are some things that some gaps that need to be filled on the educational side, and especially making certain people feel welcome when they're coming into the industry. So there's a lot of great points there. I think that definitely answered that side of it, because we have a lot to look forward to with our next generation. That's for sure.
Exactly. And just to add on that, is just thought of it, but manufacturing as a whole has the question, like, compared to, in terms of curricular, where does a young engineer go after graduating? Finance or manufacturing? And not like additive manufacturing. Additive manufacturing is then part of manufacturing. When you think about it, like, maybe there are too many engineers going to finance, but in general, I think there is, anyway, like you said, the attractiveness question about, like, getting the right engineer, the right talents going into making products which is, something very, very valuable for our communities. There's anyway an ongoing scheme, and also competing with other fields, like, let's say, finance. We need financial people, but maybe we have too many, or lawyers.
Well, that's always an argument, right? But yeah, there's a lot of things that are evolving, and so we'd like to attract maybe those people to take a different direction instead of going that way where there's too many of those people. But right
balance.
Yeah, you got to get the right balance of who's in, who's out, and yeah, it's a constant struggle. I think at least right now there's more open view of it. Obviously, there's more programs out there, and colleges, like you were alluding to, over in Ohio. There's a lot more of those programs that have been established. People are now graduating with their, PhD in additive manufacturing. And that wasn't something you heard of 5 years ago. So there's a lot of great changes that are happening that attract those people, but it is evolving. So that's why that's always a good question to hear other people's perspectives on what can attract that next generation. So thanks for going down that idea with me and thinking about what can be done. But we're talking about additive manufacturing fitting inside of manufacturing, and you've answered a lot of questions on that side of it. But where do you see now the way it's been? We're talking about the last 5 years, but going forward, how do you see AM evolving in the next few years?
I like to say that making production is actually very complicated, especially about the future. So it's hard to say. I think there are a lot of trends that we have to consider. There are a lot of trends, I would say, that shape a little bit what we could foresee for the future of additive manufacturing. But there are also some obstacles, I think, that need to be overcome to have this trend being realized. But in terms of macro trend, and this is also, kind of like my background and what I'm working with 3YOURMIND, I see one important trend, which is based on, you might be familiar with that. It's the Moore's law.
Oh, yeah.
That is basically that technological advancement double every 2 years or 3 years, which makes basically innovation exponential. So it appears that most of the new technology follow that trend, and especially when it comes to computation powers, for example. So if you look at the trend, the exponential trend of digital in general, we need to consider the trend of like data usage, computational powers into account into how additive manufacturing will move forward. So of course, we have to consider digitization and the better use of data. And if you use, by the way, I did this calculation a while ago, but if you use the Moore's law, which is an exponential growth of, let's say, computational power, it means that today in 2021, we know probably 6% of what the power of digital will be in 2026, So we have to take that into account when we want to talk about the future. So here we definitely poised in additive manufacturing to really leverage the power of data. Digital will play a huge role in automation. And in that, we'll see more and more companies getting into their own private clouds and leveraging this technology, and creating end-to-end workflows with one platform being able to entail well-defined data schemas. That's where we're going, I think, using more digital to operationalize additive manufacturing, leverage the potential of the technology. An example of that, by the way, we'll see more of this type of case, not only for manufacturers of new parts, but also in spare parts environment, because recently Alstom, the French company, has released an announcement that they reduced by 95% lead time for getting spare parts thanks to additive manufacturing. So they create, and we are starting to work with them on that as well, create that type of thread to get parts, for spare parts on demand, and really reduce the time, creating digital inventory and a way to get that part done quite easily. So there is other example. I think Shell as well has shown that they have created a huge, probably digitize between 5 to 10% of their inventory in some business unit to create digital inventory. So we'll see more and more of this type of on-demand digital-based production models. And software is moving a lot toward this direction. There are new players coming in to help that. I'm particularly looking at technology like Dendrite these days that really can help leverage that and maybe challenge a little bit other players like Materialize, and they're creating now their universal build manager with HP. That is an interesting technology. So there will be a lot of change, new player, new actions in digital that will have to be followed. In terms of the hardware, one thing I like to see more and more these days is the power and the hope there is in binder jetting. More and more companies are investing in binder jetting. Service bureau are being created, startups based on the use of binder jetting, metal or polymers. And I see some hope also to kind of like cross the chasm of productivity. And in general, there is another trend that I think we need to talk about for the future, and we have to go through here, is kind of like a more open value chain within additive manufacturing, because even though we talk about this really friendly community of AM and so on, it's still very siloed in terms of technology. You have the material, you have the technology, you have like the operators of the machines. And so far, technology are quite close, material are quite close and tied to technology. And it could be a hurdle also for end users to have that much. And sometimes also some software are closed. So this is not a sense of history in any industry. It has to be more open than that. I think it will go with the maturity of technologies. It will go with the use case, and it will be pushed by the end users. But we'll see, I believe, more and more of this open value chain and more interoperability. So basically, that would be the trend I would see as some of the most important. We could, I think, talk about other models, but like I said, I think at least before getting there, we will have some challenges to solve that. First of all, will be, building better standards within the industry, finding ways to really, advocate for the best business cases for AM. So starting not with implementing technology before finding the right application and the right business cases, working on material development to have better properties, also better costs. And of course, everything related to education, and educating not only newcomers, but also existing players of the manufacturing world.
Yeah, no, that's all great stuff, because that digital value chain is huge, especially what you're talking about on that software side there. There's so much to be done inside of additive manufacturing that's going to link everything going on and going forward. 3D printing is a great example of how we can use the digital thread in additive manufacturing, from the beginning on the CAD all the way to what happens in our post-processing and goes out and even gets reused and used in, like you're saying, digital inventories at the end of the game there, at the end of the product life cycle. So there's just so much of it on the digital side that we have a lot of new things happening and a lot of new progressions, but it makes that manufacturing value chain that much more important. And I think it's a great focus to have in the manufacturing world. So it's good to hear more of that. But it's been great talking to you, Alexandre. Anything else to add while we have you here today? It's been wonderful to have you visit.
Thank you very much, Adam and SME for inviting me. It was a pleasure talking to you. I hope being able to come to Austin soon and see you in person. At least for TCT. I think
be at RAPID
TCT
for sure in September. That's going to be a great time to reconnect, and I can't wait. It's going to be real fun to be there in person and to see everyone there. So thanks for being a positive leader and an SME additive manufacturing influencer.
Thank you very much.